My name is Aurelia Voss, 32 years old. The restaurant pulsed with an elegance that felt both fragile and performative, as though the chandeliers were trying too hard to outshine the fault lines beneath. Soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers. Glasses clinked in the hands of strangers. The air smelled faintly of seared salmon and truffle oil. At our table, a candle's flame swayed, with the breath of tension I didn't yet understand. Ethan reached across the white linen, his hand brushing mine, his thumb stroking a familiar path over my knuckles. His smile, steady, composed, was the smile that always made me believe, if only for a moment, that the world could pause just for us. "Happy anniversary, Aurelia," he said, lifting his champagne glass in a subtle toast. "Happy anniversary," I whispered back, heat rising in my chest. But then his voice shifted, lower, purposeful. "Did you like the jewelry I sent?" The words landed like a stone dropped into a still pond, ripples pushing outward, catching me off guard. I blinked, searching the table as though the gift might materialize between the cutlery and flickering candles. "Jewelry?" My voice cracked slightly. Too thin, too exposed. The warmth evaporated from Ethan's face. His jaw tightened, his smile folded inward, and suddenly his gaze drifted past me toward the next table, where my family sat like actors waiting for their cue. My parents, rigid and unreadable. My sister Nicole, draped in burgundy silk, her posture loose, her smirk already forming. Her husband Daniel shifted nervously beside her, swirling wine in his glass as though he wished it were strong enough to dissolve him. "She's lying," Ethan said, his voice steady but edged. "It was delivered directly here, a diamond necklace, worth more than the car Daniel drove tonight." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "So why is my wife sitting here empty-handed?" The clink and murmur of the restaurant seemed to recede, leaving only our table's electric silence. My mother's fork slipped from her fingers, striking porcelain with a sharp note that turned heads. My father cleared his throat, laughter bubbling out brittle and insincere. "Ethan, son, you must be mistaken. Surely it was sent somewhere else." "No." Ethan's reply cut like glass. "It came here. And I want to know why Aurelia doesn't have it." Nicole shifted leisurely, like a cat stretching before striking. She twirled the stem of her wineglass, the liquid inside catching the light like captured fire. "Maybe it got lost in the mail," she said, her tone sticky with mock sympathy. "Things happen, right?" My stomach clenched. That smirk, it wasn't improvisation. It was confession. Nicole knew. I forced my voice steady, though my hands trembled in my lap. "Nicole, did you take it?" Her smile widened, cruel and calculated. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her glass in a lazy toast to her own audacity, the way she always had when she believed she had already won. Ethan's hand slammed against the table. The glasses rattled, silverware clattered, and the entire restaurant seemed to inhale at once. He leaned forward, his voice dangerously calm, each word measured like a blade laid across skin. "If you think you can steal from me and humiliate my wife in the process, you don't know who you're dealing with." For the first time, Nicole's smirk faltered, a crack in the mask. Daniel placed a hesitant hand on her arm, his face pale. "Nicole, maybe we should—" "Return what?" she snapped, eyes flashing at him, trying to pin guilt on anyone but herself. I felt the anger rise, trembling in my bones, sharper than fear. For years, I had been the scapegoat, the silent daughter, the one expected to endure while Nicole played queen. Not tonight. My voice cut through the air, trembling but unyielding. "Don't you dare turn this on him. You took it. You wanted to ruin my night, the one night that wasn't about you." Nicole's face reddened, pride colliding with panic. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan rose abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. His presence loomed over the table, his height and fury impossible to ignore. Conversations from nearby tables faltered into silence. Every eye turned toward us. "You think this is a game?" Ethan asked, his tone quiet but lethal. "Do you have any idea what line you just crossed?" The world held still. Nicole's hand trembled around her glass. Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he reached into his jacket with reluctant hands. Slowly, he drew out a small velvet box, setting it on the table as though it burned his palm. "Here," he muttered, shame dripping from every syllable. "Take it. We don't want trouble." The sight of it, the deep blue velvet, the shape unmistakable, made my stomach lurch. The necklace. The gift Ethan had chosen for me, meant to sparkle against my skin as a promise, a celebration. My fingers hovered above it, trembling, but I didn't open it, not yet, because this was no longer about diamonds. It was about every humiliation swallowed, every silence endured, every moment my parents had turned their heads while Nicole twisted the knife. It was about being erased in plain sight. Nicole glared at Daniel, her face a storm of betrayal and rage. My mother finally spoke, her voice weak, barely above a whisper. Please, let's not make a scene. I turned to her, heat flooding my chest, years of bitterness sharpening my words. Not make a scene? When has there ever been a right place to speak? Every time she sabotaged me, you said nothing. Every time she humiliated me, you stayed silent. And tonight, she stole from my husband, and you're still defending her with your silence. My father's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. Always nothing. Ethan reached out, brushing my shoulder gently, grounding me. His voice, though calm, carried an iron finality. Aurelia, you matter to me more than anything. He looked at Nicole, his gaze hardening. And anyone who tries to hurt you will regret it. Nicole's smirk was gone, stripped away under the weight of exposure. For the first time, she had no quick retort, just silence, the very silence my parents had perfected, now turned against her. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I straightened in my chair, my voice quiet but steady. You didn't just steal a necklace, Nicole, you tried to steal my dignity. But I'm done letting you take anything from me. Ethan picked up the box, slipping it into his jacket pocket. His other hand clasped mine firmly, pulling me to my feet. We're leaving, he said, his voice carrying across the room like a closing gavel. We walked past my family, their faces frozen in a tableau of guilt, rage, and shame. I didn't shrink. I didn't bow. For once, I walked out tall, with Ethan's hand in mine, while the room of strangers watched like a jury that had already reached its verdict. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, cutting into my lungs like truth. The neon glow of the city reflected off the sidewalk, harsh and unflinching. Ethan's grip was firm, grounding me, but my chest still burned with fury and a strange, rising clarity. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The city blurred past my window as Ethan's car threaded through traffic, the rhythm of tires on asphalt steady against the storm in my chest. Streetlights smeared into streaks of white and gold, like paint as dragged by an unsteady hand. I sat in silence, my pulse still rattling from the restaurant, replaying every moment. The crack of glass when Ethan slammed his hand down, Nicole's mask slipping, Daniel's reluctant surrender of the velvet box. The box now rested on my lap, heavier than its size could explain. I kept my fingers curled around it, unable to open it. Diamonds should have symbolized celebration, love, permanence. But tonight, the gift was a wound, stitched with betrayal and silence. Ethan's eyes flicked to me in the glow of the dashboard. You don't have to carry that look, he said, his voice low, deliberate. What look? I asked, though I knew. The one that says you're still trying to protect them. The words pressed into me, like truth I didn't want to admit. My parents' faces lingered in my mind. Mother's lips pressed into silence. Father's half laugh, the brittle performance of civility. They had been like that my whole life. Tonight wasn't new. It was just undeniable. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the neighborhood was hushed, porch lights glowing like watchful eyes. I stepped out, clutching the velvet box like contraband. Ethan unlocked the front door, his movements sharp with anger contained. Inside, the house was warm, still, as if unaware of the storm we had carried back with us. In the kitchen, I finally placed the box on the table. The candle scent from the restaurant seemed to follow me, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee grounds left from the morning. I sat down slowly, like my body didn't quite trust the chair to hold me. Open it, Ethan said. Not a command, not even impatience, just a quiet urging. My hands trembled as I flipped the lid. The diamonds caught the light immediately, fierce and unapologetic. They sparkled like fire, like 100 tiny suns daring me to look away. I traced the delicate chain with my fingertip, my throat tightening. It's beautiful, I whispered, but the words felt wrong. Beauty was supposed to bring joy, not sorrow. Ethan leaned closer, his jaw still set. Look at the back. I tilted the pendant, and my breath caught. Etched into the metal, so small it was almost invisible, was an engraving. To Aurelia, my only. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a message, a claim, a vow. He hadn't told me about the engraving because it was meant to be discovered in a moment of intimacy, not dragged into the light of family treachery. They didn't just steal a necklace, Ethan said, his voice firm. They tried to steal this, us. I pressed my hand to my mouth, the truth of it unbearable and liberating all at once. For years, Nicole had stolen in smaller ways. She stole my clothes in high school, my stories when they earned sympathy, even my accomplishments by mocking them until no one took them seriously. And my parents had always let her. Sometimes they even helped. Tonight, though, she had crossed into something different, something Ethan refused to dismiss. He sat opposite me, his eyes steady, unflinching. I made some calls on the way home. My head snapped up. Calls? To my lawyer, to a few people who need to know. Aurelia, this isn't just a family squabble. This is theft. The word clanged against my ribs. Theft. It carried weight, carried consequence. I had wanted justice, but hearing it named so plainly shook me. If you go that far, I whispered, they'll never forgive me. My parents will. They already don't forgive you, Ethan cut in. Not cruel, just blunt. They forgive Nicole for everything. For you, never. You know that. The silence stretched between us, heavy with truth. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine, warm and steady. But I do, and I won't let them take another ounce of your dignity. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let that warmth replace the cold ache in my chest. But years of conditioning twisted inside me, whispering, keep the peace. Don't make it worse. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay useful. My phone buzzed suddenly on the counter, the vibration harsh in the quiet. I flinched. Ethan rose, checked the screen. Your mother, he said, voice flat. He didn't hand me the phone. Instead, he let it buzz until it stopped. A second later, another buzz. This time, Nicole. See, Ethan said, they're already scrambling. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pressing down. I thought of Nicole's smirk, how it had faltered when Ethan demanded answers. For the first time, she had been cornered, and she hated exposure more than anything. If she was calling now, it wasn't guilt. It was damage control. Another buzz, a voicemail notification this time. Ethan silenced it, then turned back to me. You don't have to listen, he said. You don't owe them that. But curiosity gnawed at me. What story were they spinning already? I stood, retrieved the phone, and pressed play. My mother's voice spilled into the room, sharp and trembling. Aurelia, how could you do this? How could you humiliate your family like that? All those people staring, whispering, you've made us look like fools. I exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping. There it was, not a word about Nicole, not a word about theft, only shame for being exposed. Ethan reached out, taking the phone gently and placing it face down on the counter. Don't let their poison back in, not tonight. I sank back into the chair, the weight of the necklace pulling my gaze. Something shifted inside me, subtle but seismic. For once, I wasn't thinking about how to make them forgive me. I was thinking about how to stop forgiving them. Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts, firm but tender. You've spent your whole life letting them walk over you. Tonight, you stood up. Don't lose that now. I swallowed hard, my voice steadier than I felt. So what do we do? His eyes softened, though his jaw remained tight. We don't just stop them from hurting you again. We make sure they never get the chance. A chill ran through me, part fear, part relief. I knew what he was asking, what he was already setting in motion. Legal exposure, public consequence. Not just a confrontation, but a reckoning. I thought of Nicole's face, her pride cracking. I thought of my parents' silence, their refusal to see me. And I thought of the engraving, my only. I closed the box slowly, my decision settling like iron in my chest. Do it. Ethan's eyes flickered with both surprise and pride. He squeezed my hand, his voice steady. Then it settled. For the first time in years, I felt something other than fear in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't joy, it wasn't even triumph. It was freedom, the fragile, dangerous kind. The kind you only find when you finally stop asking permission. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, indifferent. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the kitchen before vanishing. Life was still moving. But for me, something had stopped and restarted in a new rhythm. I wasn't the silent one anymore, And I knew, deep in my bones, that silence was the only thing Nicole and my parents had ever counted on. Tonight I had broken it, and the echoes would be loud. Morning arrived, not with sunlight, but with noise. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, each vibration like a hammer against the fragile calm of dawn. I had barely slept, tossing through memories of velvet boxes and cold stares. The engraving burned into my mind. Now, reality had caught up. I reached for the phone, but Ethan was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling through his own screen. His tie hung loose around his neck, half knotted, like he'd started getting ready for work but been pulled into a storm. "Don't look," he said without glancing at me. "I need to," I whispered. My voice cracked from exhaustion. The screen glowed with a dozen missed calls, 6 from my mother, 4 from my father, 3 from Nicole. Each came with voicemails stacked like ammunition. My stomach knotted. I opened the first. My father's voice, low and strained. "Aurelia, this has gone too far. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed yourself. Call me back and let's make this disappear before anyone else hears about it." The second was my mother, sharper, brittle as glass. "You humiliated your sister in public. How could you do this to us? People were watching, Aurelia. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" The word family cut deeper than any accusation. This family. As though I wasn't part of it. As though exposing truth made me less a daughter. The third voicemail was Nicole herself, her voice swaying between rage and desperation. "You think you've won something? You haven't. You've just made yourself look pathetic. But if you don't tell Ethan to stop, if you don't fix this, I swear I'll make sure you regret it." My fingers trembled as I dropped the phone on the comforter. They're already twisting it. Ethan finally looked at me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. "Of course they are. That's what they do." He stood, knotting his tie fully now, his movements clipped. "It doesn't matter. The truth is on our side, and I've spoken with my lawyer." I swallowed. The word lawyer still felt foreign in the landscape of family betrayal. Family fights weren't supposed to need legal representation. But then, family wasn't supposed to steal. "What did he say?" I asked. "That what Nicole did isn't just petty, it's criminal. The necklace was delivered, signed for. We can trace it. Restaurant staff can testify. There may even be cameras that caught Daniel handing it over. If they want to play games, we have evidence." A strange chill threaded through me. "So we take them to court?" "Not yet," Ethan said, buttoning his cufflinks with precision. "But they need to know that's where this is headed if they keep pushing. Exposure is leverage." I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to quiet the swirl in my head. For years, Nicole had controlled the narrative, mocking me in front of cousins, twisting my words at holiday dinners, turning our parents' silence into her shield. But this time, the narrative wasn't hers to control. The thought should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. By mid-morning, the messages had multiplied. Dozens of texts lit up my screen, each one angrier than the last. From Mom, "You've torn this family apart. For what? Jewelry?" From Dad, "Call me now. You're making things worse." From Nicole, "You think Ethan will protect you when he realizes you're just drama? Wait and see." I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to sever the lifeline of poison, but instead I set it face down, refusing to answer. For once, silence was my weapon. Ethan glanced at me from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand. "Good. Don't feed them. They're trying to bait you into saying something they can twist." His confidence steadied me, but deep inside the ache persisted. "They'll never forgive me." He stepped closer, his voice lower, certain. "They already haven't. You've been the scapegoat your whole life. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about truth." The word truth echoed, louder than the buzzing phone. Around noon, the storm grew louder. Daniel called Ethan directly, his voice shaky, almost pleading. Ethan put the phone on speaker, his tone measured. "Daniel," Ethan said, "you handed me that box in the restaurant. Do you remember?" A pause, then Daniel's uneasy reply. "Yes, but it was Nicole. Look, can we just settle this quietly? No one has to know." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's too late for quiet. She stole a necklace worth thousands. She humiliated my wife. That's not family drama. That's theft, and there are consequences." "Please," Daniel stammered. "We don't want publicity." "That's not my problem," Ethan said, and ended the call. The silence after was heavier than his words. Daniel's panic confirmed what we already knew. They were scrambling to contain the fallout, not to repair the damage. I sat at the table, staring at the necklace, now resting in its box again. The engraving glinted faintly in the light, my only. A reminder that even as my family tried to strip me bare, I was not alone. But another memory surfaced, uninvited. Years ago, when I was 15, an heirloom vase in the living room had shattered during a party. Nicole had been the one holding it, laughing too loudly, careless. When our parents stormed in, she pointed at me, wide-eyed, innocent. Aurelia did it. And they believed her. I had taken the blame, grounded for a month, while Nicole smirked behind closed doors. That night had set the pattern. Nicole acted, I paid, and the silence of my parents was the glue that held the lie together. Now, years later, the pattern had repeated, but this time I wasn't willing to be the one who paid. By late afternoon, the fallout had spilled beyond our phones. Mutual friends began sending clipped messages. What happened last night? Nicole's furious. Others asked cautiously, "Is it true about the necklace?" The whispers had already begun. Ethan returned from his office, his expression grim but focused. It's spreading, which is good. Exposure is power. They can't hide behind silence if everyone's watching. I wanted to believe him, but a small, stubborn part of me still feared what came next. My family had never faced consequence before. They wouldn't crawl away quietly. They would fight, twist, accuse, demand. I closed the velvet box with trembling hands, the click of it sharp in the quiet room. "Then let them watch," I whispered. Ethan placed his hand on my shoulder, warm and grounding. "Good, because the reckoning has already begun." That night, as the city lights shimmered outside our windows, I lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of Ethan's breathing beside me. The storm in my head wouldn't quiet. I replayed my parents' voicemails, their words laced with shame but never remorse. I replayed Nicole's threat, her promise to make me regret it. And through it all, I felt something shifting inside me. Fear was still there, yes, but braided with resolve. This wasn't about a necklace, it was about the years they had stolen, the dignity, the voice, the sense of belonging. Now for the first time, I was taking it back. And I knew they would come for me harder than ever. The next morning, the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional buzz of my phone on the counter. Each vibration carried a fresh wave of accusations. Texts, voicemails, missed calls, but I let them stack up, unanswered. For once, silence was theirs to bear. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of untouched coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the velvet box in front of me. Its weight was absurd for something so small. It wasn't the diamonds that pressed on me. It was the engraving, the promise, the truth that had nearly been stolen. Ethan moved around the room, already crisp in his suit, but his movements were slower today, more deliberate. He was watching me carefully, gauging whether I would break. I didn't. Not yet. "They won't stop," he said quietly, adjusting his cufflinks. "They'll try new angles, apologies that aren't apologies, maybe even threats. It's all about control." "I know," I murmured. My voice surprised me. It wasn't weary. It was steady. And then, unbidden, a memory rose. I was 16, sitting at the dining room table under the heavy tick of the grandfather clock. My mother's china cabinet gleamed behind me, filled with plates we weren't allowed to touch. Nicole had come in late, flushed from some party, and dropped her purse onto the table. The sound was a sharp thud, spilling lipstick and a wad of bills onto the surface. Our father appeared in the doorway, his gaze narrowing. "Where did you get that money?" he asked. Nicole's eyes had flickered toward me, quick as a match strike. Then she smiled sweetly. "Aurelia gave it to me. She borrowed from her savings, didn't you, sis?" My protest died in my throat, because I knew how it would play out. Dad would believe her. Mom would remain silent. And if I argued, I'd only look petty, jealous. So I said nothing. And just like that, the ledger grew. My sacrifice, her gain, our parents' approval. Back in the present, the memory stung like fresh salt. I realized then that my family had always run on a system of accounts. Debts and credits, truth and silence, all carefully balanced in a book no one ever admitted existed. And I had been the one paying the interest. Not anymore. By mid-afternoon, I decided to face them, not to reconcile, but to see if they even understood the depth of what they had done. Ethan was wary, but he didn't try to stop me. "Go," he said, "but don't go alone." But he drove me to my parents' house but stayed in the car, parked under the shade of the old oak tree that had once been my childhood fortress. Its branches stretched wide, but the swing that used to hang there was long gone, just like the innocence that swing had once carried. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, her lips thin, her eyes sharp. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her presence still carried the same weight. "Aurelia," she said. No warmth, just my name, clipped. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and something simmering on the stove. Familiar, but suffocating. My father sat in his chair, hands folded, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," my mother said, ushering me into the living room. I stayed standing. "Then talk." Her hands fluttered, as though she were smoothing invisible wrinkles. "What happened at the restaurant? It was unfortunate, but you escalated it. Making a scene like that, it wasn't necessary." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "She stole from me, from Ethan, from us, and your concern is that I made a scene." My father's eyes flicked toward mine, then away. He cleared his throat. "It should have been handled privately. Family matters don't belong in public." "Family matters," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "So Nicole steals, and you stay silent. I speak, and suddenly I'm the one ruining the family. That's the math, isn't it?" My mother's jaw tightened. "She's your sister. She's always been spirited." "Spirited?" I snapped. "She's cruel, and you've enabled her cruelty for years." The silence that followed was thick, the kind of silence I had grown up in. The silence that said, "We won't acknowledge this, so it can't be true." But I wasn't 16 anymore. I stepped closer, my voice firm. "You want me to stay quiet, to protect her, to protect you from embarrassment. That ledger you keep, the one where I'm always the one who pays, it's closed. I'm not covering for her anymore." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear, but neither spoke. Finally, I shook my head. "You don't want reconciliation. You want control, and I'm done giving it." Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked out. The click of the front door closing behind me felt like a seal. Ethan watched as I returned to the car. His eyes searched mine, but I didn't flinch. "Well?" he asked. "They're not changing," I said flatly. "They don't see it. They never will." He nodded once, as though he had expected that answer. Then we moved forward, together. The rest of the drive passed in silence, but it wasn't the suffocating kind anymore. It was the silence of decision, of lines drawn. That evening, Ethan poured us each a glass of wine and slid his laptop across the table. "There's a gala tomorrow," he said. "I'd planned for us to go weeks ago. We should still go." My first instinct was resistance. "After all this?" "Especially after this," he said. "Nicole thrives on whispers. She wants you hiding. Instead, we show up. You wear the necklace. You let them see you, strong, unshaken." I stared at him, the weight of his words settling. The thought of walking into a ballroom full of people, many of whom had probably already heard rumors, made my stomach clench. But then I remembered my mother's voice. "You humiliated your sister. You embarrassed us." Maybe it was time they learned humiliation cuts both ways. "All right," I whispered, "we go." Ethan's hand covered mine, steady, grounding. "Then tomorrow, you'll stand in that room, and you won't just be wearing a necklace. You'll be wearing the truth." The thought sent a tremor through me, part fear, part anticipation. Tomorrow, the ledger would balance in public view. Tomorrow, Nicole wouldn't have silence to shield her. The ballroom glowed like a cathedral of glass and gold, chandeliers spilling light across polished floors and mirrored walls. Violins swelled from the orchestra pit, their music threading through the air like spun silk. Waiters in black vests glided between tables, trays balanced with champagne flutes that sparkled under the light. It was a room designed for power, for appearances, for performances, and tonight, I was stepping into it with no script but my own. I adjusted the necklace around my collarbone as we entered, the diamonds catching every flash of the cameras at the door. The weight of it was grounding, a reminder etched into my skin. To Aurelia, my only. The engraving burned against me like a secret shield, proof that whatever storm awaited, the truth was mine to carry. Ethan's hand rested lightly at the small of my back, guiding me forward with steady confidence. His presence felt like armor, but he didn't overshadow me. He wanted me seen. For the first time in my life, I wanted that too. Eyes followed us as we moved through the crowd. Some whispered, some nodded, some stared openly. I felt their gaze, but it didn't shrink me. Instead, it steadied me. The rumors had already spread. Nicole's frantic attempts at damage control had ensured that. And yet, here I was, wearing the very thing she had tried to take. The first hour passed in a blur of polite conversations, clinking glasses, and introductions I barely registered. I smiled when expected, sipped my champagne, but my senses were tuned to one thing only, the inevitable. Because I knew my family, and if Ethan was right, they wouldn't stay away. They never stayed away when they thought control was slipping. And then, as dessert was being served, the inevitable arrived. The double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open, and there they were, my parents, rigid with dignity, Daniel, pale and uneasy, and Nicole, draped in crimson, her smile stretched too wide, brittle at the edges. Entitlement radiated from her like perfume. The air shifted, conversations faltered, people turned. Nicole's eyes found me immediately, narrowing on the necklace gleaming against my skin. Her expression twisted, rage and disbelief warring across her face. She cut through the crowd with deliberate steps, Daniel trailing behind her like a man chained to a storm. When she reached me, her voice carried, sharp enough to slice through the music. "That's mine!" The room stilled. The violins faltered, then stopped. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. Cameras lifted. Ethan's arm slipped protectively around my waist, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was mine to answer. I set my glass down, turned to face her fully. "No, Nicole, it never was." Her voice rose, shrill now, feeding off the audience. "You don't deserve it. You never deserved anything you have. I should have had it. I always should have." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Whispers darted like sparks. My parents stepped forward, their faces tight with panic, trying to control the narrative with their presence. My mother's voice wavered as she tried to intervene. "Please, let's not do this here." But I cut across her, my voice clear, steady, stronger than I had ever heard it. "Why not here? Why not in front of witnesses? Every time Nicole has humiliated me, you've told me to be quiet. Every time she's lied, you've defended her with your silence. Not this time." Nicole's face flushed red, her bravado fraying. "You're pathetic, always playing the victim. That necklace was wasted on you. You're nothing." The words struck, but they didn't wound. Not anymore. I lifted the pendant slightly so the light caught it, letting the engraving glint like a blade. "Funny," I said softly, "because this says otherwise." Gasps threaded through the onlookers. Ethan leaned in, his voice low but carrying enough for those nearest to hear. "There's an engraving on that necklace, a message only I could have written, for my wife. Would you like to explain how that could possibly belong to you?" Nicole faltered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Daniel shifted, tugging at her sleeve, his face pale. "Nicole, stop," he whispered, but the microphone of the room had already caught her. Whispers turned into pointed stares, phones lifted, cameras clicked. The ballroom wasn't just watching, it was recording. I stepped closer, my voice unwavering. "You tried to take this from me, but it wasn't just about jewelry. You wanted to strip me of dignity, of respect, the one thing you've never allowed me to have. But look around, Nicole. All your lies, all your cruelty, they couldn't buy you respect. They couldn't break me." Her face crumpled, anger warping into desperation. My parents reached out, each of them trying to quiet the scene, but it was too late. The whispers had turned into a tide. The crowd wasn't seeing me as the problem anymore. They were seeing her. Ethan's voice sealed it, calm and final, each word carrying like thunder. "Walk away now, because after tonight, the world will know exactly who you are." Nicole's lips trembled. For once, she had no clever retort, no smirk to shield her. She turned abruptly, her heels clattering against the polished floor as she dragged Daniel with her. My parents followed, their heads bowed, their faces stiff with humiliation. The doors closed behind them, leaving the ballroom buzzing, electric with murmurs. But I stood taller than I ever had, Ethan's hand steady at my side, the necklace warm against my skin. Applause broke out. Not loud, not raucous, but scattered, genuine. A few people clapped, others nodded, as though acknowledging not victory, but survival. And in that moment, I realized survival itself was its own form of triumph. The orchestra resumed, the music swelling again, but the energy in the room had shifted. No longer whispers about my shame. Now whispers about my strength. Ethan leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. You were flawless. I let out a shaky laugh, tears pricking my eyes but refusing to fall. I didn't feel flawless. I felt free. He kissed the side of my temple, the simplest gesture, but in front of that crowd, it felt like an act of war. Freedom suits you, he murmured. The rest of the evening blurred, but I remember the feeling, not hiding, not shrinking, but standing in the center of the room, unbroken. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family scapegoat. I wasn't the silent one. I was Aurelia Voss, and I was finally heard. Yet even as the music carried me, I knew the night wasn't the end. Exposure was never final. My family wouldn't slink away quietly. They would regroup, retaliate, rewrite. But tonight, at least, I had drawn a line in the marble floor of that ballroom, and I had drawn it in public. The morning after the gala felt eerily still, as if the city itself had paused to watch what would come next. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in pale stripes, dust motes floating like suspended verdicts. I sat at the kitchen table, hair still pinned from the night before, my gown draped over a chair like the remnants of a battle dress. The necklace lay in its velvet box in front of me, closed, its presence heavier than ever. Ethan was already in his suit, pacing with a phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, measured. Legal words drifted across the room. Defamation, evidence, chain of custody. Each syllable sounded like a brick laid in the wall we were building between us and them. When he hung up, he exhaled slowly and turned to me. It's beginning, he said. What happened last night spread faster than I expected. There are photos, video clips, people are talking. I rubbed my hands together, trying to chase away the chill crawling up my arms. And them? His jaw clenched. They're in damage control mode. Your father left a voicemail at 3 a.m. Something about lawyers. Nicole hasn't stopped posting vague rants online, blaming you. And Daniel... He hesitated. What about Daniel? I pressed. He called me directly, said he handed over the box because he was terrified. He admitted Nicole planned it, but... Ethan paused, his expression shifting. He hinted that if she gets cornered, she'll throw your parents under the bus. Claim they orchestrated it. A bitter laugh escaped me, too sharp to sound like amusement. Of course she would. Loyalty has never been her currency. Ethan leaned on the counter, his eyes steady on me. This is where the choice comes in. Do we push this all the way, or do we let exposure be its own punishment? The question sat heavy between us. For years, I had fantasized about consequences for Nicole, imagined her mask cracking, her lies unraveling. Last night, I had tasted that justice. But the thought of dragging it into courts, of headlines and depositions, of lawyers picking apart every ugly corner of my family's history, it made my stomach knot. What happens if we press charges? I asked quietly. Best case, she faces legal repercussions. At minimum, restitution, public record of guilt. Worst case, your parents get dragged in if she shifts blame. And you know she will. I closed my eyes, the image rising. My parents sitting in a courtroom, Nicole pointing her finger at them, their silence weaponized into guilt. They had let her steal from me all my life, but still, seeing them fall would wound something. I wasn't sure I wanted wounded. Ethan must have read the conflict on my face. He came closer, crouching beside me, his hand covering mine. This isn't about vengeance, Aurelia. It's about deciding what gives you peace. Do you want a trial, or do you want a boundary so strong they can never cross it again? Peace. The word struck deeper than anger. I thought back to that moment in the ballroom. The hush, the cameras flashing, Nicole unraveling under the weight of truth. For the first time, the silence hadn't belonged to me. It had belonged to her. That was power. Maybe that was enough. I don't need them in handcuffs, I said finally, my voice steady. I just need them out of my life, completely. Ethan nodded slowly, approval flickering in his eyes. Then that's the line we draw. By afternoon, the phone calls had shifted in tone. My mother's latest voicemail was a desperate plea, her voice cracking. Aurelia, please, think about what you're doing. You're tearing the family apart. We can fix this if you just talk to us. Don't let outsiders decide our fate. Outsiders. She meant Ethan. She meant anyone who wasn't willing to protect Nicole's lies. I deleted the message without saving it. The texts from Nicole were harsher, her desperation clothed in fury. You think you're so righteous. You've ruined me. Everyone's turning against me because of you. For once, her words didn't sting. They freed me. Because she finally admitted it. She was losing. That evening, Ethan poured us wine and we sat on the back patio, the autumn air crisp, the neighborhood quiet. The necklace lay between us on the table, gleaming in the last threads of sunlight. "You don't have to wear it again if it feels tainted," he said softly. I shook my head. "No, I want to. It's not tainted. It survived. So did I." He studied me for a moment, then raised his glass. "To survival, then." I clinked mine against his, the sound sharp and clear in the twilight. Later, alone, I slipped the necklace around my neck, the engraving pressed against my skin, warm, almost alive. I stood before the mirror, studying my reflection. For years, I had looked into mirrors and seen absence, someone smaller, quieter, erased. Tonight, I saw myself, unflinching. I whispered the words aloud, a vow only I could hear. No more silence. The phone buzzed again on the counter, but I didn't check it. I didn't need to. Whatever storm they tried to conjure next, I was no longer their scapegoat. The cost had been high, years of swallowed pain, of bruised dignity, but the consequence was clarity. I mattered. Not because they said so, but because I finally believed it myself. And that I realized as the night closed around me was freedom.